Hello beautiful people, welcome to my channel. If you clicked on this video, you might be curious or even confused about the upcoming elections in Germany and about who to vote for. And I don't blame you. It's an overwhelming period when it seems like every single vote matters. Germany is at a political crossroads. The far right is surging, the ruling coalition is weak, and CDU is seemingly cozying up to anti-migrant rhetoric. And AfD? Well, they are not just rising in polls, they are normalizing policies that could wreck Germany's economy, social stability, and democracy. They want the voters to believe that they're looking out for everyday Germans. Meanwhile, their actual policies would do the exact opposite. So, what's the solution and how can we push back? Well, I'm here to hopefully help you out. In this video, I'll break down what each party stands for, the key issues in the elections like migration, economy, or climate, and how to vote strategically to push back the far right and secure a progressive future. Because let's be real, this election might be the most important one Germany has had in years.
Wenn wir am Ruder sind, wir reißen alle Windkraftwerke.
The latest poll revealed a deeply polarized political climate in Germany. The right wing is surging while progressives are struggling to maintain their relevance and cohesion. So far, CDU-CSU has been leading in the polls with between 29 to 34% of potential votes. And Christian Democrats have been traditionally a center-right party under Angela Merkel, who has been at the head of the German government for most of the 21st century. But with the new leader, Friedrich Merz, it seems like CDU is shifting more and more to the right. If I had to shortly describe Friedrich Merz, he is an ex-corporate man who loves flying planes and making sexist remarks about his female colleagues. I don't know, that was enough for me to have an idea of what kind of person he is. But under Merz, CDU has been shifting towards more anti-immigration rhetoric, pushing for stricter asylum controls, and a few days ago he pretty much broke the firewall by relying on AfD votes to pass a non-binding resolution to strengthen border controls and accelerate deportations. Apart from that, CDU is shifting towards weaker climate policies by prioritizing economic growth over sustainable development and environmental action, and the party is taking a nationalist Germany first approach, eerily reminding us of AfD. In the meantime, the AfD has established itself as the second largest party in some regions, polling at 20 to 23%. They're pushing for extreme anti-migrant policies, using terms like remigration, which is pretty much mass deportations, and border rejections. They also have a strong anti-EU agenda, calling for dismantling the European Union in favor of a Europe of nations. And surprise, surprise, they're in complete climate denial, supporting the use of fossil fuels like coal back to 1800s, I guess, and completely rejecting renewables. The threat that all of this poses is that if the AfD continues to strengthen and if the CDU aligns more with the far-right rhetoric, Germany risks to become more authoritarian and economically unstable. This would weaken Germany's role in the EU, which Germany has traditionally been one of the leading powers in the Union. It would also erode migrant rights and specifically asylum seeker and refugee rights. And it would also stall climate action, throwing Germany back in terms of economic development. And this is why it's crucial for Germany's progressive parties to unify and mobilize their voter base. If we take a look at SPD, which is currently at the head of the coalition government, they are polling at 15 to 17%. However, their popularity is declining due to weak leadership, hey Schultz, and moderate policies. Basically, they support moderate social spending, skilled migration. However, they have alienated their voters due to compromises in the past years. Now, moving on to the clear favorites among progressive voters, at least the ones I've spoken to, we have the Greens, which poll at around 13 to 15%. In the past weeks, they have emerged as the most viable progressive force, led by Robert Habeck, who has been among the leaders when it comes to the chancellor position. The Greens obviously prioritize climate action with renewable energy investment, lower electricity taxes. They stand for social reforms with affordable housing, stronger workers' rights, and a 15 euro minimum wage. And finally, they have a pro-EU stance and support Ukraine. The only thing is that they have taken a more moderate stance when it comes to Israel. And then we have Die Linke polling at 3 to 5%. They are the most radical left-wing mainstream party, and they advocate for a nationwide rent cap, free public daycare, heavy taxes on the wealthy to fund public services, and wealth redistribution, and they have strong pro-asylum and pro-immigration policies. Die Linke seem like the most obvious choice for more leftist voters. However, they risk falling below the 5% threshold, which could split the leftist vote and weaken the influence. The German left party traditionally hasn't been so popular since the reunification of Germany, since they are associated with Russia and GDR, and they are not so popular in Western Germany. However, there are some chances of them gaining momentum ever since the most pro-Russian fraction split from the part and turned into the current Sarah-Wagenknecht alliance.
Wir brauchen Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund, die in Deutschland.
Now let's quickly look at the key election issues and where each party stands. First, we have the topic of migration and asylum. As I mentioned previously in the video, AfD, which represents the German far right, wants mass deportations under their remigration plan. They would reject asylum seekers outright at the border, and they generally spread anti-immigrant rhetoric, blaming foreigners for economic issues.
Wir haben die Antworten. Wir haben einen Plan. Wir haben einen Zukunftsplan für Deutschland, den wir in den ersten 100 Tagen einer Regierungsbeteiligung angehen. Die Grenzen lückenlos schließen und jeden illegal und ohne Papiere Einreisenden zurückweisen. Und eine ganz klare Ansage an alle Welt: Die deutschen Grenzen sind dicht, liebe Freunde. Sie sind dicht.
A lot of experts fear that such anti-immigrant rhetoric could scare off a lot of skilled immigrants that Germany so desperately needs. As for CDU, CSU, or the German center-right, they are less extreme than AfD. However, they are increasingly adopting anti-immigrant positions. For example, they support tighter border controls and rejecting asylum seekers at the border. Moving on to SPD, which are the center-left, they support skilled migration. However, they have been hesitant about defending asylum seeker or refugee rights under the pressure from the right wing. At the same time, at least they support EU-wide migration solutions rather than taking unilateral measures. As for the Greens at the center-left, they are officially pro-immigration. However, in practice, they have sometimes compromised on stricter asylum rules while in coalition. They still support skilled immigration and refugee rights, but as I mentioned, they have watered down their stance due to pressure from FDP and CDU. Then we have Die Linke at far left. They are fully pro-immigration and asylum rights. They support abolishing deportations, better refugee integration, and stronger anti-discrimination policies for migrants. I will also quickly cover FDP, which support targeted skilled migration, digital systems, like a points-based immigration system. They support also a controlled asylum system and advocate for European cooperation. As for Sarah Wagenknecht's party, she has taken a more cautious stance on migration. She advocates for the integration of existing migrants, and she has frequently critiqued open border policies as detrimental to lower-income citizens. Now let's take a look at a very important topic, which is the economy and social policies. Starting with AfD, they are very pro-business, which is surprising knowing that a big chunk of their voters is lower to middle income. It seems like some people don't know what they're voting for. But anyway, they want to cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations, and they also oppose minimum wage increase. Similarly, CDU-CSU wants to cut taxes on businesses. They oppose new wealth taxes, and they prioritize economic development over social spending. SPD on paper wants to tax the rich. However, they've been quite timid in execution. Overall, they support modest social spending and minimum wage increase. The Greens have a slightly more radical approach. They vouch for wealth tax on the super rich, a 15 euro minimum wage, stronger labor rights, and investment in infrastructure and digitalization. Die Linke stand for radical redistribution. They want massive tax increases on millionaires and corporations, nationwide rent cap, which they have already done in Berlin, free daycare and school lunches, and universal healthcare expansion. The core focus for FDP is economic liberalism and reduced government intervention, so they vouch for lower taxes for businesses and deregulation, and they are strongly opposed to wealth taxes and debt-financed government spending. BSW, which is a really interesting party with a mix of far-right and far-left policies, advocates for economic justice, including higher wages, opposition to privatization. They are against neoliberal globalization and overall economic protectionism. The topic of climate and energy is going to be mostly disappointing apart from two parties. Like, come on, Germany, have you seen what France did last year? But anyway, as I mentioned, AfD is in complete climate denial and against EU climate goals. CDU prefers a market-based approach, supporting climate action as long as it is not hurtful to businesses. SPD supports renewable energy expansion, but so far we've seen that the party has compromised on phasing out fossil fuels. due to coalition tensions. The Greens obviously have the strongest pro-climate position. They support investing in wind and solar, ending fossil fuel dependence, reducing plastic waste, and they want to invest heavily in green infrastructure. Then we have Die Linke, which support radical climate action, and rightfully so. They demand that the rich and corporations pay for it, and not regular workers, and they are against market-based solutions. As for FDP, they support market-based climate solutions, for example, emissions trading, and they also oppose subsidies for renewables and CO2 taxes that burden businesses. Finally, Sarah Wagenknecht, it's a hard name to pronounce, criticizes mainstream climate policies. She calls them elitist and harmful to workers, and she mainly focuses on protecting traditional industries and reducing costs for low-income households. And then let's quickly take a look at the foreign policy of each party. AfD is pro-Russia, against Ukraine aid, wants to restore ties with Putin, generally supportive of Israel, anti-Muslim, and anti-EU. Overall, a total mess. CDU wants to support Ukraine, but without overspending, is strongly pro-Israel and generally pro-EU. SPD, under the leadership of Schulz, has been hesitant on Ukraine, prioritizing diplomacy. Overall, SPD is pro-Israel, pro-EU, and supportive of strengthening EU cooperation. The Greens are the most pro-Ukraine party. They've been very vocal about strong military and economic aid and fighting of the Russian influence. They have been careful on the Israel-Palestine issue and have supported human rights protection. They advocate for stronger EU and global cooperation. Die Linke advocate for diplomacy and a ceasefire in Ukraine. They have actively criticized the Israeli government, condemning the violence on both sides, and they are also critical of the US imperialism. FDP also supports Ukraine aid. They are strongly pro-Israel and pro-EU and NATO. Finally, BSW advocate for diplomatic solutions in Ukraine, opposing NATO expansion and military aid. They have actually criticized Israeli policies, taking an anti-war stance. At the same time, they are Eurosceptical, calling for stronger national sovereignty protection. For a lot of progressive voters that want to offset the right-wing influence, the Greens seem to be the most pragmatic option. After all, they have a very well-balanced program that targets the climate change, aims to improve the German economy with digitalization and investments in infrastructure. They are supportive of businesses, while at the same time taking care of the middle class as well. But of course not to the extent of Die Linke. Finally, they are bound to have a strong influence in the next coalition government, which sets them apart from Die Linke, for example. As for SPD, a lot of people are disappointed in this party due to their indecisiveness, even though they clearly still have a lot of support and would still be better than, for example, CDU with Friedrich Merz. And of course, there's Die Linke with truly leftist policies. The problem here is the risk of them not passing the 5% threshold. However, in the last elections, despite not passing the threshold, they still got into the parliament due to the direct mandate vote. Being in Bundestag, they could become an important pillar for leftist voices. And I didn't mention them in this video, but there are so many smaller parties like Volt that could align way better with your individual views on politics. But let's answer the main question here: how to vote to make a difference and counter the right-wing forces. So how the voting system works is we have two votes. The first one is the Direktmandat, where you vote for a candidate in your district. And the second vote, or the Zweitstimme, decides how many seats a party gets in the Bundestag. It's the more important vote. Based on this, let's say your district has a strong left-wing candidate, then you should definitely vote for them in the first vote. In the second vote, you can go for the party that can actually influence the next coalition. For example, you could vote for the Greens if you align with their values, since they are very likely to have a strong influence in the next coalition. Overall, if you want a strong, progressive, and a well-balanced force, then go for the Greens as the pragmatic choice. If you want a more radical choice and you're ready to gamble in terms of the 5% threshold, then you could go for Die Linke or other smaller parties like Volt. And I would say that there is nothing wrong with supporting smaller progressive parties, even if they might not get into the Bundestag, because strategic voting often holds back smaller parties from getting bigger. There are also really convenient tools like Valomat, which help you identify which parties align with your views the most. And I believe they will have the Bundestag 2025 test very soon. But at the end of the day, what really matters is to actually cast your vote, because this election is about blocking CDU and Merz from normalizing right-wing policies. It's about making sure that AfD doesn't gain more power, and it's about ensuring that Germany moves forward rather than backward. So do your research, cast your vote, and don't let the right wing take over without a fight. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it helped you get a clearer picture of these elections, and see you in the next one.